It's that time once again. It's time for Talking the Bible with the Brandons. Featuring Brandon and Brandon. Or Laser or Blazer or something. The one who wants a mullet. Yeah, that one.
Good morning. Good morning to all of our friends out there across the interwebs, the land of Facebook, from the two Brandons and Spurgeon here. You're really distracting me right now.
I'm not distracting you. Charles Spurgeon is distracting
You're such
you.
a child. He's like, what are you like? Are you like, what, 65 now or something? And
so childish, he's not even born yet.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. You're so childish, not even born yet. I like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, let's recalibrate, refocus. Sounds like points from my
Hey, you
sermon
know
here.
what? This reminds me. Bridget turned 6 on Tuesday, and she's the one that immediately. I had this one day,
Yep.
and she came in and broke the bobblehead.
Mm-hmm.
So now he just looks up. I just had to imagine him making a point, and he's looking up to the Lord.
I think it's better. I think it's
like it
better,
better
that
that
way.
way?
Yeah. I mean, like he's not focused, on things here of this
Okay.
world, but on the one to come.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
I didn't even realize it was broke. I thought
Yeah, it's kind of looks. It's kind of, but oh yeah, she did almost immediately.
Well, that's what they say. A lot of people got kids. Say this is why we can't have nice things. It's like Heather and I were talking about, getting a new kitchen table with our Trump dollars. Because we're getting that big stimulus check there, and we're gonna put most of it in savings. But we've been wanting a kitchen table, and we were talking about will we get cushions on the kitchen seats or not? But we thought no. We've got little ones. Let's
Well,
not.
you just said you can't. That's why people can't have nice things because they have kids.
Little kids,
That's
yeah.
why I can't have anything.
Because you
'cause I
have
have
so
6
many
kids.
kids. That's right.
And when we got a kitchen set, we wrapped our chairs in a clear plastic thing. I can't.
That
what
sounds
it's
real nice.
called?
Tracy
she
allowed
did
that?
it. No, she did it, and it wasn't bad at all. But it did. It protected
Your
the
kitchen set was wrapped in plastic,
Yeah,
and you're
it's not
saying
like
it wasn't
saran
bad.
wrap. It's not like saran wrap. It was a different kind of thing. You need to ask her.
I'll look into.
Yeah.
I'll ask the furniture salesman. Hey, do you guys have any plastic wrap for this kitchen
Got
set?
any cellophane?
Okay, hey guys. So this is kind of the end of the week here, and we're reaching kind of the end of Saul's reign here. I mean, you talk about going down in flames here. This is
Tragic
like,
end.
yeah. I mean, this is like one of those meltdowns you see on reality TV or something.
It's a tragic
like.
figure. He is.
I mean, gosh, and it's like, dude, you're so hard headed. You're so vain. I bet this. You think this?
Dude, you sang last episode. Would you stop? It's not that good.
It's not that bad either. All right. So Brandon, why don't you kind of give us a heads up, man? What can we expect to see here in 1 Samuel?
Very similar to
Yep.
the other two chapters. Saul makes an unlawful sacrifice in direct disobedience to God. God tells him one thing to do, and he doesn't do it, and then he tries to justify it. He tries to explain it away and give an excuse, and it's kind of like the last straw at this point in Saul's reign. God has pulled the kingdom from him and is going to give it to David in return. So
Yeah. So what was the final straw that broke the back? Well, God commanded through Samuel that Saul in this battle, it says right here in verse 3 where he says, "Go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant." That's a tough verse. Ox, sheep, camel, and donkey.
Yep.
Saul doesn't do that, and his his military doesn't do that, and you may think, oh, well, maybe Saul had a soft spot for the babies there, or whatever. But that wasn't it. Saul kept back the choicest of all of the flocks of Amalek. Is that how you say Amalek?
Mm-hmm.
And, Samuel comes to him and he calls him out on it. He's like, Saul, what's going on here? What did you do? And
Yeah, I love the way he does
his
it.
excuse.
No, wait a minute. He comes up to him and says, "Is this the sound of sheep
The bleeding of
bleeding in
sheep.
my ears? Like there shouldn't be any sheep bleeding.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
should be dead."
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, here Saul, he's got this victory. He's enjoying the spoils of war here, and then reality hits him hard here. So, the verse that I highlighted was verse 24. Saul basically owns it. He comes clean. I think he initially says, "Oh, we were setting these things aside for sacrifice. We were."
Which is where our memory verse comes in. It's better to obey God's voice than to offer a sacrifice.
You bet.
So religious ritual is not more important than personal obedience to the Lord. Singing a song in worship service, even though that's obedience to God, or giving your offering, that's obedience to God. But the religious ritual aspect, just because I perform those duties doesn't mean I have a license to disobey God with my life through the week.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I give my tithe check to the church here, and who are you to tell me how I ought to live my life, or that kind of thing. And this is what we see here with Saul. He wants to do it his way. He wants to worship God on his terms. And God doesn't, he doesn't want you to be obedient in 99% of the things in your life. He wants you to be fully obedient, especially if you're the king. You're setting the example for his people. So, the jig's up here, and we see right here in verse 24, it says, Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. So I thought that was quite telling there, the reason why Saul sinned here. And so my explanation was Samuel rebuked Saul for not being obedient to the Lord's commands because he feared men more than God. And for my application, I said oftentimes we sin against God when we fear what other people think more than what God is leading us to do. And my prayer this week, Lord, help me to always see you for who you are, a man for who and for man for who he really is, so that I may be faithful and pleasing to you. If God is for us, who can be against us? So, no doubt, there's some fear of man here. There was, Saul was probably not so popular, especially after making his troops fast after the last military incursion there. So he probably wanted to curry some favor here.
Right.
Said, all right, guys, you can take the spoil here. But really that's just a fear of man. That's a fear of what other people think before, what God really thinks. And, led him to make a very bad decision here.
Yeah. Yeah, what's interesting, though, too, is nowhere does it say in the text that the people, I don't remember, the people rose up and demanded this
it doesn't
of
say
Saul.
that.
So it could be that he just made that up.
Making an excuse?
It's possible, but nonetheless, it is a true statement. If you fear men, you won't fear God. You fear God, you won't fear men, and you end up trying to please men instead of pleasing God.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we struggle with that. Human beings really struggle with that in many, many ways. That's what Pilate did. It's just one of those things. You know what? It was interesting to me, though, about this chapter, too, was in verse 9, all that was despised and worthless they devoted to destruction and kept the best of the stuff, which they weren't supposed to do.
That's right.
And it reminded me, he keeps the best for himself. Reminded me of a sermon illustration I read in a Charles Spurgeon sermon.
Ooh, okay. Taking it back to the lectures.
Yeah, about a man and his horse. And so there's the story he tells of a guy common peasant guy who raised horses and brings his finest horse to the king. And he said, King, I just want to present this horse to you. It's the best I have as a token of my gratitude, appreciation, and love for you. And the king is moved by the gift because he knows it's a costly gift for this guy. And he gives him, I forget, more land or something, okay? And there was a noble in the room who was watching this, and he's like, I see what just happened. So the next day, the noble comes and brings a horse, a very fine horse, to the king. And the king accepts the gift and just kind of turns around and walks away. And the noble protests and is like, wait a minute. You gave this other peasant all this stuff because he gave you a great horse, and now I'm presenting you a great horse. And the king looks at him and says, no, that's not how it works. He said, you gave yourself a great horse. You presented yourself a gift. And the point he was making was, you didn't do that because you loved me or wanted to obey me.
You did it.
You did it to get what you could get out of it. And that, I think, is Saul's whole idea. Some people are trying all they can do to obey God and use God to get what they want out of life in their kingdom. And God sees through that, and he's like, nope, that's not going to work.
Yeah. So I think, when it's like, I've talked to people that are like this, man. I think we all have, they think that, the reason for, jumping through all the religious hoops, or whatever, is to get to heaven,
Right.
And ultimately,
Or your best life now.
Sure. And ultimately, kind of just off that illustration there, you're giving that horse to yourself there, you're thinking just about you, so, I always say, and maybe it's controversial, but I say, I don't want heaven. I want Jesus.
Right.
So if wherever Jesus is, if Jesus is in hell, then I want to be in hell, because being in the presence of Jesus is what heaven is. That's, heaven isn't a place. It's not a destination. It's not, like the, Muslims version, where you're in this oasis, and being served by all of these servants there or whatever. You don't have a ranch kind of out there 100 acres to yourself.
Well, it's not like the life you always wanted in this world that you get there. But it is
not
a
fantasy
new heavens,
island.
It is new heavens, new earth. It is a physical place.
It'll be good.
And it'll be, but yes, what makes it is that God will be in the midst of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why you're looking at your life and your walk with the Lord. And we talked about this last night as a family. What you see here is an obedience to the Lord as long as it doesn't cost Saul anything. Mm-hmm. And I think same way, fearing man or fearing God. If you have a Christianity that is cost you nothing, then it's really not worth anything either. Our walk with the Lord, there ought to be some form of sacrifice involved. There's things we are giving up in order to get more of Christ in our life. So it is gain for us, but it's not the kind of gain that the flesh wants all the time, which is what Saul is. He's driven by his flesh, and that's why, and ultimately that's why God pulls his spirit away from God and departs from him. So
yeah. Well, gang, I think that's all the time we've got for today. We really
how
didn't.
much time do we have? Because we didn't
even.
The interesting part, the statement in verse 23: rebellion is as the sin of divination; presumption is as iniquity and idolatry.
That's pretty bad.
Basically rebellion to witchcraft and just presuming upon the Lord to idolatry. So exploring why that is would be a good homework assignment, I suppose.
There you go. Well, and we didn't even touch on David at all either.
No.
Just kind of a young buck, David out there.
We'll get there though. He starts becoming the star of the show.
Oh yeah. So I think 1 Samuel 17:18. That's
next.
That's David taking down Goliath too. So that's coming. So, but yeah, gang, that's all the time we've got for today. Once again,
for the week.
Yeah, for the week. We love you guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in with us all week. Look forward to worshiping with you in spirit and in truth come Sunday.
10:30 online, Facebook, and
YouTube.
hopefully this week, maybe, or definitely next week, there'll be an update for you regarding our church being able to gather again. That's coming. An update on that is coming soon.
That's right. All right. So we will see you guys then.